boil it down to a certain picture of your life. You can put down a numerical number to it too, right? How much money do you need to afford that life? But you need to have a vision of what satisfaction looks like for you. And once you have that, some of you might actually realize, actually, I already have everything that I want. Okay, so if we met at a party and you ask me what I do for work, I would say...
You would say don't talk about work at the party.
No. I'm happy to talk about work, which is terrible, but I enjoy my work a lot.
Yes.
I would say that I'm a cultural change strategist, which is a fancy way of saying I help leaders and teams and organizations strategize how to change maybe parts of their team culture or org culture that they feel doesn't work for them. Or they may have a cultural aspiration that they want to work towards, but are not sure about it. I'm the person to call to help you. Let's sit down, let's think about it, and I can coach, I can facilitate, and I can design how to go about it. And that actually gives me a lot of fulfillment. So I enjoy my work a lot.
And are you planning to be an MP again? I think that's the question in the house. Because I got to know you because of your speeches. I was like, wow, this lady has great speeches. Like, I hope everybody put out these kind of speeches, Very convinced that you have the ability to talk about cultural change, But are you gonna, put your name in the hat and actually run? Yeah.
I think it's a serious job. I mean, I see it as a job.
So other people don't see it as a job?
I think it's quite possible that not everyone sees it as a job.
I thought it's the biggest job in the house,
Well, okay, so to be fair, so I'll take it as this is my own perspective.
Okay.
I'm in the camp that believes the job is pretty complex and you should just do that one job. And I think it's really hard to do it as a part-time job or do it as a side job. Yeah, so
I'm from that camp, don't worry.
Yeah, I think it's hard work.
Yeah,
I think it's hard work.
Yes,
It's work that is respectable, should be done well, and I think it's difficult. So, to give a simple answer to will I ever be an MP, I'm someone who believes that you shouldn't say no outright because you never know how times change, how seasons change, and I believe that every Singaporean with the skills and with the desire, I should be prepared to say yes when the time is right. But for me right now, I don't think that's the time. Yeah.
Why? Like, what do you focus on now? I mean, like, there's the career part, right? You're doing
Yeah,
your thing.
I enjoy the work that I do.
Yeah, you love that.
And because of my own convictions that you cannot do double time, I would have to give up the work that I do, which right now for me, I find is really meaningful. I find that I can contribute to society quite deliberately in this way. And I don't think I can do that if I were an MP. So I got nothing against it. It's just by principle, I would give up one. I have to give up one to do the other.
Okay. So one day if you see Kuik goes unemployed, then next round it's gonna come in. It's like name and the hat.
Well, I don't know lah.
We'll see. But your speeches are memorable. I love them, right? And that's why I told Walid, right? Hey, Walid, connect me with Shiao-Yin. Right? I want to have her on the show. By the way, if you have not checked out TTWW, right? Teh Tarik with Walid. It's a great podcast. Please check them out. Yeah, but today we're gonna focus a little bit on the whole like society and money kind of situation, because I think these days there's without going into like complex high level concepts to like alienate the people. A lot of us, we associate ourselves with the money that we make. Right. And you realize that there's some level of like, people feel superior when they make more money. But a lot of people are spending in many ways to try to fill the gap within themselves.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of the line that I want to thread today together with you. Of course, with you must touch more like these kind of topics, right? so
I don't know what that means, but sure.
No, like more like like complicated, social dynamics and personal choices.
Okay.
And because it transcends three parts, right?
Yes.
First is the market economics of like how things are priced.
Yeah.
Right. Next is about how society positions certain things and how we value certain things.
Yeah.
And the third is the individual, right? The individual trying to thread this whole space of like, I want to do this also.
Okay.
But then there's some things don't pay. Then, I feel like lacking if I do something that pays well, but don't like meet who I am or something like
Okay.
that, right? So
Yep.
so I think this kind of the triangle that I'm going for, right?
Okay,
Together
there's
with
a lot
you.
there.
Yeah,
So
there's a
we
lot
can
there.
like take baby steps where in whatever direction
yes,
it
yes,
feels
yes,
right
yes,
for
yes.
you.
So
Yeah.
let's maybe we start with like, is there something of a natural role in society? Like as society develops, is there something where, you know, like I'm born into a certain family or I do certain thing, then naturally there's a certain role. Like even based on what you were saying just now,
Yeah.
like if you have the abilities, you should take this job, right? So all these are like prerequisites to certain jobs and certain ideas, right? And just wondering, do you feel like there is certain realities for someone to take up certain jobs?
Yeah, well,
Look at this.
I guess I have a resistance to the using the word like natural, because
Okay,
to me
yeah.
like natural just means like human behavior.
Mm.
What you're talking about seems to be more like, is it true that let's say calcified privileges in certain systems or in certain sectors of work, and
Let's say in
yes,
Singapore, yeah.
well, of course, everywhere, right? Everywhere there's that, right? That there's a crust of privilege or there's a crust of power that has been built up over time. It's not something that you and I even created to some extent. We were born into it. You know, as in we're born into this season in history.
Yeah, yeah.
And blaming, like, let's say your friend was born in a rich family for it is like, you can't do that, because it's not like they did it either. They were born into the circumstance, right? So can you break through that crust or overcome it? You can, but the more crusty it is, the more time encrusted that privilege, the harder it is, So is it true that if you're born in a certain family that you don't have to deal with it? Yeah, that and those are sort of like the facts that we want to digest, lah.
Yes.
At the same time, you don't want to run the risk of telling yourself a false story that everywhere is crust. I don't know how else to
It's
put this.
crispy, everywhere it's crispy.
Because like it's
Yes,
hard, right? Because we
No,
can't
but I
talk
like that
about
word.
a
I like that word, yeah.
specific. Yeah, we can't talk about a specific sector or a specific company and all that. I'm quite sure there's certain types of jobs and certain types of sectors where you need that crust of privilege to even like get through those doors, right? But is that the job that you're looking for in the first place? And if you're not, then perhaps like that crustiness is not the issue. I think it might stop you from seeing what is the real work that needs to be done, lah. So I think there is a lot of work out there that don't need to be so and so's family or from, I don't know, a certain, let's say, status to be able to access that, but you might need to work doubly, triply hard to overcome that.
Like what?
Yeah.
Give me some.
I don't know,
thoughts on
like,
that.
I'm just trying to think. Like,
Yeah.
it's generally a bit difficult also for me to answer this question, because I've only worked for myself since I got out of school, so I don't have a lot of lived experience in I work under someone else's system and suffer under someone else's prejudices. Whatever mistakes I make, it's my fault.
It's mine. Yeah.
Yeah, but I get it that you might have maybe entered an organization or entered a sector where you're suddenly forced to deal with a lot of, like, I don't know, like funny things that you didn't decide. Yeah, certain policies you didn't decide, or certain prejudices that you wouldn't subscribe to, but if your boss did, then too bad for you, kind of thing. So I get it.
Okay. So how crusty is Singapore at this point in time? I mean, we are not. We've developed, hundreds of years to get to where we are pre-Singapore, and then now, many years down. So I can understand, like,
Yeah.
power have consolidated,
Yeah.
interest groups have come together. There's some level of stability, so it does feel very crusty. And then
Yeah.
people feel jaded, like, no, there's no space for me to develop further. Like, there's a whole bunch or a whole generation of people
Yes.
that's growing up here
Yep.
in their 30s
Yep.
and made some money, but feel like they're not going further anymore.
I guess it's where is it that you want to go, lah, So I'm imagining, if let's say I am a gifted singer or a gifted actress, I think it's factually, I think, quite clear that there's limits to how far you can go in the entertainment industry here.
Yeah.
Right, and it's not by fault of the entertainment industry in a way. I mean, we can talk about the faults, but I don't know enough about it. But I know by facts, like, the audience size isn't big.
Yeah.
and it's just not as sophisticated or developed an industry by sheer audience size. So I would agree that if you are that gifted, then you might need to go overseas to find those opportunities. If that's the big waters you want to swim in. But if let's say you're a gifted singer and actress in Singapore, and part of your thing is, and I want to shake up the industry here, I want to change up the way we manage artists here, then this is a great place to do it too, because it's not that sophisticated. So it's kind of like, what is your goal in the first place, you see?
Fair. But I think for most people, it feels like it is a choice between what I really want to do and like the need to feed my family. Right? Because certain sectors are not big, right? And I think that is the idea here, right? I think the reality is every country has certain sectors that are bigger than others, right? Because this of the reality of the space. And sometimes we struggle, right, to ask ourselves like, hey, why we cannot like entertainment, why cannot be as big as like other people, right? Why I cannot be like a Xiao S, right? Or something like why certain sectors are smaller, and we go into this like endless loop in our head, right? Like, why Singapore cannot be like that? Why can't we do other things? Why I have to work in finance? That kind of thing.
I guess it's what is it that I think the big existential question everyone can learn to ask themselves honestly is, what is it that you really want out of life? Give ourselves that freedom to try to get what we want in a reasonable way. If what you want is overseas and you have the means and the freedom, then go overseas. There's no like, I must die make it here in Singapore rather than overseas. There are just some jobs that are just not going to be as lucrative in Singapore as it might be elsewhere, because it's just not the same geography. It's not the same market size.
And that's a reality check, right?
It's a reality check. So I think I'm not a fan of, let's say, the big sweeping opinion of like, in Singapore all jobs suck kind of thing. I think that it is quite specific to looking at like in that particular industry where you want to flourish, you want to get opportunities. Is it true, factually speaking, that in Singapore it's just not going to be that way? And if it's not, then go overseas and like find that path for yourself.
But some people may not want to go that far, right? So then they may end up settling in an alternative career, or they will try to find meaning in something else, right? How do you kind of look at this thing, and what of advice for some of the people that are kind of in that crossroads, they've made some money, they kind of huddled through this whole situation of like, like after school, like, wow, and then, after they grind a few years, they kind of settle into the reality, and they're trying to make choices where to go.
If we're going to be very specific about the person group that we're talking about, so let's assume you are not exactly poor without options. You are fairly wealthy-ish. You have enough loose change. You have enough loose change to not worry about your next meal and your house, and like you can still go overseas, and your biggest pain is existential pain. Right?
I know
that
the middle
hate
income.
my job.
The middle income in Singapore is the biggest headache is where to go holiday this year, right?
No, I mean, to be fair, like I think there are middle class families who are going through a lot of crunch. So
especially this period, I think.
So we're all not. We might call ourselves like, okay, we're all from the middle class, but not everyone in the middle class is going through the same experience. Some are going through a huge crunch, right? But let's say we are talking specifically about a group that you are wealthy enough that you don't have any immediate financial pains, and your pains are more of an existential crisis. Like, I don't like my job, I'm not sure whether I should go, why can't I get that opportunity? So that, right? I think the first thing is to acknowledge you are in a beautiful position, which is actually hard sometimes to actually take in, that you are actually in a really, really good position right now to exercise some personal agency and exercise some freedom of choice. And you have to ask yourself, is that what you want? Because sometimes the thing that you want will make you have to take in risk, discomfort, a challenge to your wonderful, beautiful status quo right now. and maybe that's not what you want. Maybe, like, if you want to be very honest, maybe what you want is, I do want to collect X amount of money every month and hate my boss and not think too hard. I kind of like that, and I like complaining. And if that's you, then okay, you do you. But let's be clear, it's not that you didn't have a choice. But if you do, and if, let's say, the complaining is a real thing, that means you are going through a real existential crisis of, the more I stay in this job, the more my soul is getting sucked out of me, and I'm starting to be a bit like mentally like crunched up because of this, and I'm really worried. Like, I want to leave my job. I know I've always been dreaming of leaving my job, but I'm scared to. And that's a real problem.
It is.
Right?
Is.
And for that person, it's sort of a different crossroads. It's I think you have to fully appreciate that the longer you put off doing what is true for you, the more fragmented and disconnected you're going to be, and the more emotionally and psychologically impacted you're going to be. And you have to make a judgment call about whether you want to continue in brokenness, or you want to make a choice that would support your wholeness. And sometimes that's very scary, because it can look like, let's say, taking a sabbatical for a year, not working in that high stress, high paying job, just to, I don't know, take a whole mental year break, or to try out that other meaningful job you've always wanted to do but have been scared because Papa said don't go and do it. Right? No, it's true.
It's true.
I mean, I'm saying this loosely,
Yeah.
and I
No, but a
don't.
lot of people have that,
And I
yes.
don't mean to, and I don't want anyone hearing this to feel disrespected about it, because it's not. It's true. A lot of people do end up living half a life because they still think this is what my parents want me to do, or this is what society wants me to do. And if that's the narrative, you want to challenge yourself, especially if you are old enough to take this responsibility. I think mid-30s onwards, a lot of us will go through a midlife unraveling. One of the ways to deal with that is to go through a process of reparenting yourself, which means to acknowledge that your parents were imperfect, they made their mistakes, sometimes very crippling mistakes, but you are now old enough to be the parent that they couldn't be for you. And this is especially poignant if you are having your own kids.
Yeah.
And your kids will benefit greatly from you reparenting your own self. This is you have an inner child that needs to feel like you have the freedom, the love, the safety to start making choices that you always wished you could make as a younger person. But for those who feel, well, I don't have that option, I have to, let's say, keep that job, that's okay to give yourself the grace to recognize that right now you're doing a hard thing, you're doing a job that maybe you don't completely connect with, but you are making a very noble choice right now to serve, let's say, the needs of your family. Can you digest that for yourself, that is a really good, noble thing that you are doing? Not every one of us is going to get to live, let's say, the dream that you fantasized about when you were younger. And if you're in a position right now where you've had to lay that dream to rest, it's healthy to give yourself that space to grieve for the loss of that dream, so that you can move on and embrace the dream that you are creating.
I know.
Do you get what I mean?
I get it. I'm vibing with you. That's the thing. I'm like, yes.
So I think that we don't give ourselves enough space to acknowledge the realities that sometimes there are losses, sometimes there are things to grieve. And only when you do that, then can you embrace the newness of opportunities and the newness of dreams that are there for you to take on as well. But that if you don't let go of that in a graceful, gracious way, then that has a hold on you.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm not so much a fan of like, oh, just go for your dream and your purpose.
I don't like that. So
it's not,
to me, it's simple problems are already solved. Right? So if it was that clear, it was that simplistic, just go for it. Then you would have already done it.
Yes.
The reality is you are struggling between the choice of, like what you said, right? Maybe you're sacrificing for the fam. You're trying to do something else, or maybe you're trying to meet some societal expectations, but at the same time, you're letting some part of you die,
Yeah,
in
yeah.
that sense.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, and when you do, you'll be surprised that it's a paradox, but sometimes something has to die so that something can live. And that's like sort of a life wisdom that I think
Yeah.
many people have understood only when they went through that process.
Yes.
So it's one of
Yes.
those things which, if your friend says it to you, you're going to be so annoyed. Like,
Yeah, it's
what are you
like,
talking about?
yeah, like no more chicken soup. MSG too high, this one.
Uncle Roger loved this video already. So much MSG.
But yeah, I get it. I love it. Oh my god, I love it. In that view,
Yeah.
right? What is money then to the individual?
Let me start with myself. What is money to me? I think money to me is just something that makes life a little easier. I mean, it's just a unit of value, right? Like I need it to buy chicken rice. I need it to pay gas bills, whatever. I'm not beholden to it. I must be aware of its power on me. When you watch, like, let's say the numbers of your bank account go up, go down, that kind of thing, and you want to acknowledge, like, there's a surprising psychological effect on you. And you got to ask yourself, like, is that healthy? Why is it that one number makes you happy and one number makes you sad? Right. I think objectively there is a number that I think you ought to be sad because that number cannot pay the bills and it's very stressful.
Yes.
Right. But then beyond that, there's like a weirdness of like is 1 million enough for you? Is 1.5? Is 2? That kind of thing.
People then cling on to a lot of abstract ideas to try to rationalize that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
after a while, it's a weird numbers game, right? Like if you come down to it factually, like how much do you really need to live the life that most matters to you? So not so much like how much do you need to live the life that you want, because our wants are sometimes quite endless. So it's like, how much money do you really need to live the life that matters most to you? If you calculate, I think for a lot of people, what matters most is not super duper costly. Yeah.
There's a lot of caveats there.
There's not. Because like what matters to you most? If you can tell me with a straight face, what matters to me most is having that $1 million watch on my wrist, then the next question is, why does that matter to you so much? When people are asked what matters to them most, most of them are just going to say something along the lines of like, I have to be happy, my kids must be happy, or like my wife is happy, or I get to hang out with my friends. It's a lot of things which are not super duper costly in many ways. Yeah. And I think that's the dangerous but profound conversation we each need to learn to have ourselves. Yeah, because the confronting thing is, what is money to you? So is money your identity? And not even just money is your identity, it's like a certain unit of money, the identity you're striving for. And if you reach that number, is that going to be enough?
And on some level, societal ideas then shape the identity on some level, right? There's the self, but then there's also the society, there's also the
Yes.
environment that then shapes the self, right? So, and from a social level or from a
Right.
country's level, when we look at money, when we look at GDP, or we look at all these kind of growth, sometimes it feels like it's endless, right? Like we just keep want to grow.
Yeah.
And then how do I reconcile this with like, actually, I just want to like chill with my friends, people that I like. So I think where I'm going with is the narrative, right? The big narrative of like, we want to grow, want to progress, make more money. And then
Yes.
there's always headline numbers, right? Bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And it affects the individual.
It does, but you as an individual also need to start to draw your own boundaries of like, you do you, good for you. You got your whatever handbag and whatever watch and whatever condo, right? And what's that to me? Like if that's what matters to you, does that matter to me? And if like your question, and if like you find yourself answering, actually what matters to me is I beat the other person, then like I think you got bigger problems.
Yeah. You can play other games. Yeah, you
Like,
can. Yeah.
It's really important that everyone decides for themselves what is the story that you want to live. Because when you die, I think it will become starkly clear to you whether you have succeeded at the story that mattered most to you. Like no one's going to be standing around your deathbed and thinking like, why you never
Why you never?
why you never
If
beat me,
only.
you know, or why you never have that condo, you know,
Mm,
like no one. I like to think of the deathbed thing because I think it's the most clarifying scenario.
There's a certain end to it. I think that's
It's
the
the
beauty
most
to it.
predictable,
Yeah.
factual end. You are
Yeah.
going to die. You don't even know when you will die. So how then do you want to live? And can you start living that life right now? Because who is to know if tomorrow you don't get hit by a car, right? Yeah.
But sometimes what matters to us,
Yes.
right? Like the meaning of our lives or
Yeah.
what do we want,
Yeah.
runs counter to social goals or societal narratives, right?
Yeah.
Like let's say, I think these days a bit better, right? Like these days you see campaigns that, you know, it's okay not to be okay, you know, some of these other campaigns, right? So it's great. But when you just wind back a few years
Yeah.
ago, it was like progress, you know, grow,
Yeah,
right? So that
yeah.
is the broad narrative.
Yes.
And sometimes it runs counter to our own narratives,
Yes.
right?
And
So how do I then reconcile this?
so from a individual development point of view, an individual transformation point of view, right? The transforming moment for many individuals is when they realize it is okay and I am okay when I am not who you want me to be, as long as I'm okay with who I want to be. And that almost doesn't have to do with money. It comes on like, will you be okay with determining your own version of okayness?
Although we
Yeah.
have to recognize that it is on some level challenging, right? For a lot of people.
Well, yeah,
It's a
okay.
process.
Okay, if we take this out of the money field for a while, right? So let's say you go to parties, and every time you go to a party, someone always asks you like, how many children you have, and you say like 0, and they say, why don't you have 2, right? So and let's say every party they bug you about this, like have 2 children
Yeah,
thing.
stop at 2 ma.
Whatever lah, you know. So it's like, so I mean,
Don't
you,
off my
so
ass,
is
ah.
it you have to come to your own conclusion of like, I may be sick and tired of people asking me why I don't have 2, but at some point I have to grow up, you know, and like sort of step into your power and your truth, right? To say, like, I get it that you would love for me to have 2. I currently have 0, and that's okay. And be okay with however they react, because ultimately it's your life and they have nothing to do with it. And like, how much longer do you want to live being affected by like what other people say, you know? Yeah.
So are you okay with your life now? Like where are you on this journey? Because I feel like I'm on it keeps developing.
Right,
Like
right.
at first I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm okay. Then after that it's like, what's going on? You know, like
Well,
like
yeah,
there are new
but
revelations.
that is life.
Yes,
That is
yes.
life, you know. Like it's so I'm not saying that societal opinions or cultural biases are easy to navigate, but I'm saying like you only develop the muscle to deal with it
Yes.
if
yes.
you keep,
Yes, yes.
you
It's
know,
an endless
it's
practice.
an endless,
yes,
and
yes.
it's not even about the money thing per se. It could be about everything.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
yeah.
it's about your looks. It's about how many children you have. It's about everything. You know, it just gets silly after a while. And you got to see that it's actually a bit of a silliness that we play with each other, right? Like did you send boy to tuition at 5 years old? You know, and then like you have to be okay with saying, well, I don't send my kid to tuition at 5. And if that person says, why not? You got to be okay with saying like, I get it that you believe in it. I don't, and I'm fine. And I hope you're fine with it too, you know? And maybe stop hanging out with people like that. You know, maybe they're not your people. Yeah, so it's quite big and profound in some ways.
yes.
So when I hear you say like, okay, there's all these like societal judgments and all that, like, but which part of society are you hanging out with? Because that's not true of all groups.
Yes, yes.
You know, like maybe you need a different set of friends.
Yes.
And a different exposure to another circle who's like completely okay,
yes,
with your
yes.
choices, even supportive, or even say like, wow, you have so much more than I, and then you suddenly realize, oh dear, you know, like what waters have I been swimming in?
Yeah.
you know.
I get it.
Yeah.
And I think there's a natural development of like as you develop and find more of yourself, you
Yeah.
will the environment around you will change. The people that you hang out with will change, right? So then
Yes.
eventually you find a new bunch of people, you pace life with them.
No,
It's
yeah.
okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
no, and I get it. Like it's okay. So I think I live a comfortable enough life, but I am aware that some of my choices may look poor to someone else.
In what sense?
For example, I don't drive and I take public transport, of which I think is fine and I enjoy it. But I get it that there are people who completely assume that everyone around them have a car. Sometimes I get invites to speak on a panel, and there was once I had to speak on a panel where, let's just say, the people on the panel were very rich and unaware of how rich they sound, even over like lunch, because usually like in panels, you have a pre-lunch discussion, right? And honestly, this is a crowd that talks about like, oh yeah, so I heard you bought a new yacht, la la la, and they're not being like
No, they're not.
noxious.
Yeah,
and
they're
also,
not. That's the interesting
it's
part.
their life.
Yes,
it's their
yes,
life,
yes,
you
yes.
know. And I am sitting there and listening, and if I don't do my own self work, that they're not talking about their yachts at you. They're not showing off to you. They're just talking about their life.
It's true. It's just like how moms talk about tuition center, right?
Yeah,
There's this other.
Yeah, or like boy got
here.
100, my kid got
yeah.
20. Like it's not
They're not
an
attacking
insult.
you.
They're not attacking
yes.
you. It's not
just
about you.
That's a concern.
Yeah.
That's why they talk about it. Yeah.
So so to some degree, like it's also on your own self to manage. Like it's got nothing to do with me. Good for you, right? And if you say like, well, you know what, I don't have a yacht, I take public transport, right?
Yeah. I swam here in another.
And you gotta be like, even if let's say they react badly, right, and they're like, oh no, or make a face at you, right? You gotta be like okay with like, well, I'm happy with that. I'm fine.
Yeah.
I'm quite sure that in certain circles, like just if I say like I don't drive or I don't have a car and I don't intend to, you'll probably get some people who are like, why? Like don't you think you should take better care of yourself? Or I don't know what kind of nonsense people say.
I've heard that before. I've heard that before.
They'll
Yes,
say
yes,
that.
yes.
Or like, when you're 40, you should take care. Then I'll be like, well, I think I'm taking great care of myself by not having a car. I enjoy it.
I think that's a lot of inner work kind of thing, right? There's a lot of inner work. You gotta like maybe rework some of how you associate with money, who the people you hang out with, knowing yourself a little bit better. So those are great stuff.
Yeah.
But what about us projecting on broader society then? So let's say it's not all about inner work, right? So, okay, some things I work on myself, but some things I want to work on society. I want to change society to fit how I want it to be. Because why I ask this question? Because very often we always talk about like, work on yourself, like work on what you can control, blah, blah. And I get it, right? Because it's yourself you can control, right?
Yes.
What you eat, what you wake up, all these things are easier to control. But there's some problems that are just stacked against you.
Yes.
And you're not willing to budge on like, what you can control.
Yeah.
And then you need to project that.
Like when you intervene on the system.
Yes, so you have to intervene on the system. And how does one go about doing something like that?
I do think the first step to intervening on the system is to make sure you do your self-work.
Okay.
Because the last thing you want is for you intervene on the system and the system push back on you and say, that's because you got some things going on in yourself. Then you're like, oh, no, it's true.
Yeah, actually.
So like you so it's okay. So this is not about like only when you are perfect and got all your ducks in a row then you can intervene on the system. It's just the more you do like self-awareness work, the more you can understand what's going on for you and recognize how much of this is really just your work and how much of it is, oh no, there's something that we need to talk about in this system, right? So for example, let's say you are a freelance graphic designer, freelance creative, and a lot of the odds are sometimes stacked against the freelancer about like how soon they get paid by the big company, that kind of stuff.
Yes. Please pay me a bit earlier, okay? Thank you. I say one.
It's horrible. Like how like freelancers have to sometimes beg for the money to come from a big company.
Yeah,
There's a lot of money.
It's annoying. Yes.
So I think that, but you see, if you are a freelancer who, let's say, has not done their self-work on their temper or on their like, let's say like all the worst judgments of like big MNCs all come out, right? Then when you go and attack, let's say the poor, let's say the hapless finance person who, with like, all you MNC like that, then you are giving that other person the opportunity to say, oh, you're so unreasonable. You want to give the system, in some sense, the least amount of excuses to not listen to you, because you want to go to them with like great respect, great skill, great, like, this is the problem, these are the facts. I would say, like, I would prefer, let's say, my money come in by this date, right? And if that doesn't happen, this is what I am prepared to do. Call me back.
I get it.
You get me? Like, yeah.
And that is on some level a power dynamics, right?
Yeah.
Like I can walk out of a job because I'm fine with not taking this particular gig,
Yeah.
let's say, right? So there's okay, other than the whole like inner work, we work through some of these things. How do I then go about then gathering more power to influence?
Yeah, I think for an individual, right, you feel a lot more empowered if you keep practicing putting your voice into the room about what are you really thinking, feeling, and wanting from the other or from the system, and to do it in a way that preserves your dignity and your integrity and your boundaries. And saying that may not necessarily get you your request, because the system may say, well, good for you, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to change. Then you might say, then do for what? I already know the answer is going to be no. But
That's so common.
no, it's common.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of people say, like, so I don't want to put in the effort.
Yes, I get
But
it.
the reason why you do it is not just for the possibility of a good response from the system. And that is a possibility. You do it for yourself because you want to continuously practice the art of, I have a voice, I have thoughts, I have needs, I have feelings, and I will put it on the table. Because to silence myself is just to continue to weaken myself. And you must not do that to yourself. So it's not so much whether you get what you want, because sometimes you're just not going to get it. It's like, are you going to get better and better at asking for what you need and want?
I think we went through one round, right?
Yeah,
With
yeah.
like the whole of there's certain social expectations,
Yeah.
there's a certain function to how things work,
Yeah,
reality check of life,
yeah,
inner work, making choices with limited resources given money,
Yeah.
and all that, right? So to sum it all up,
Yeah.
right, I feel like there is a big part of anchoring and coming back
Yeah.
to reality, right? And fully integrate to live a full life within the community that you choose to be or within broader society, right? So any last words for someone that's trying to do that, to
Okay.
push further and live in the real world? I don't know if that makes sense.
A lot of people think that the answer to scarcity is abundance, but it's not. The answer to scarcity is satisfaction. Because scarcity is a factual reality that all of us live under, right? And that's not going to go away anytime. Actually, no matter how rich you get, there's always some kind of scarcity that you live in. Then people start to imagine, okay, the answer to that is more lah, abundance. I need more. I need more. And it doesn't matter if you are a broke middle class person or a billionaire. It still sounds the same. I need more, right? And the existential question is, how much more is enough? And if you cannot answer that question, like, where got such thing as enough? It will never be enough. Then like you are just, then you've already got your answer. You'll never be rich enough. It would, the number is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yes.
So actually the existential question is, then what does satisfaction look like for you? True satisfaction. Boil it down to a certain picture of your life. You can put down a numerical number to it too, right? How much money do you need to afford that life? But you need to have a vision of what satisfaction looks like for you. And once you have that, some of you might actually realize, actually, I already have everything that I want. I can be satisfied. And
Yes.
sometimes that's the big wake-up call then. And sometimes people get that wake-up call too late.
I agree. And I mean, to end off, my viewpoint is it is not mutually exclusive to accept where you are now and work towards the future.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people feel like I cannot accept where I am. I gotta keep moving. It's all about the dream, but
It's both.
it's both.
It's
They are not
both.
mutually exclusive. They can
Yeah,
coexist at the same time. You can be happy and comfortable and recognize where you are today. Or you can be unhappy. It's also acceptable. But
yeah.
just recognizing this is where I am. I have a family. This is what's happening. I have, I'm from like 2 kids. I'm a peasant. Whatever. Like recognizing where you are and continue to dream and work towards the future.
Yeah.
They are not mutually exclusive. They can coexist.
Yes, and also have a healthy sense of reality that you never know when everything changes. Like, what if the next day you learn you have cancer? And it's horrible. Nobody wants that. But like, even in that horrendous scenario, you have to do the same work of what does satisfaction look like for me now? Maybe you asked me that yesterday. It was like, to get that dream job and it's nearly there. I can taste it. Now you just found out you only got 3 months more to live. If you don't change your idea of what is satisfaction, then you're going to die super, super unhappy and dissatisfied. And that's how some people do end up. But then you have those beautiful stories where like, actually I realized 3 months more, this is what I want. I want to sell off all my stuff. I want to make amends with my parents and all that. And I will die, but I will die with a reasonable amount of satisfaction that this was the life I wanted to lead. And that is actually the secret to having a decent life. Satisfaction.
Great. Love it. First question is, what has been your best and worst investment you've ever made?
Oh my goodness.
Does not need to be financial.
Okay, I'll just pick one that immediately came to my mind. One of the best and worst investments I made was, I can't remember how much I paid for it, a couple of $1,000 for this like charlatan's real estate course. It was like in my 20s and I thought like, I need to grow up and learn some of this stuff. So I signed up for some like, one of those advertisements like, oh, come in for this course and learn all you need about real estate. And I went in there and I was thinking like, man, this is such a sham. Like I paid a few $1,000s and this guy is like talking nonsense, but all
Just
the auntie and
motivating
uncles
you,
are
yeah.
like sucking it up. And I was so angry. And it was a terrible investment of my $1,000, but it was also good because like I realized there's a lot of shills out there.
Yeah.
And like, I'm so done with this nonsense.
Yeah, that's my genesis of why I started this whole thing.
Oh,
I
is
was
it?
very annoyed by Facebook ads telling me that I can succeed just by learning this one thing.
That's one.
Great. Is there a best investment or is that... I get that it was a best and worst.
My best investment was 2-year but turned into a 4-year long course in CHIM phrase, Gestalt Organization and Systems Development. It is the foundation of the way I do consulting. But it was a transforming program because I learned so much in there about who I am, what I want, and it's a gift that keeps giving back. Yeah, and I don't mean it just from a skill building point of view, but it was the best development program that I've ever been on. Yeah.
What is it again?
The program is it's called iGold. But the skill set that you learn is Gestalt therapy-based organization and systems development work. So it was a very, very expensive course, but well worth everything. Yeah.
Great. What is one thing under $100 that was a game changer for you?
Nothing makes me happier than like eating a Shake Shack double burger. Honestly, like I don't need to spend that much on a meal to get very satisfied. And the Shake Shack like double burger to me is a great example of like, screw your $500 omakase stuff, right? Like that, a pretty expensive burger, but not horrendously expensive. Like gives me like, I can't imagine, like I want to pay like so much more for that same level of satisfaction. Under $100, you can get a lot of pleasure.
I get it. And the beauty is you no longer need to go to like the airport to get it, right? Multiple branches. I think I walked past Bishan. They have one there today. So yeah.
It's a stupid $100 item. But it's the one that came to mind.
Great. Last question.
Yeah.
One place you learn that you think is very underrated. It can be a book, podcast, YouTube, website.
Like one thing that I learned.
Yeah, like one place that you learn from.
One place that I learned from.
That's very underrated in your view. Like people need to know about this place.
Go to YouTube, look up this woman called Dr. Ramani Durvasala, and she will give you the best free crash course in narcissism. because everybody needs a free education in how to recognize people who are very, 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 very bad for you, and recognize every red flag so you do not get cheated and bamboozled by them. And there's many narcissists out there. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just moved by how it's free content. It's the best free education out there. And she puts out like a video every week.
Oh my
And it's the one
goodness.
YouTube channel where you see the comment section is not toxic. And I think it's worthwhile for everyone to watch it so that you can just recognize whether that toxic person in your life is actually clinically a narcissist. And I think not many people know how to recognize one. Yeah, so it's a great free resource, which I think many people don't know about.
Great. Must share this one. Okay, so yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. If anybody wants to follow you,
Yeah.
where can they follow you? How do they keep track of your work?
You can just look up Common Ground Civic Center and Consultancy. So we are, I cannot for the life of me remember like our Insta handles and all that. But if you Google that Common Ground Civic Center and Consultancy, you should be able to find the LinkedIn and Facebook and all that kind of stuff. You can look up my name, like Shiao-Yin Kuik. There's only one of that name, so it's quite easy to find online. Yeah.
It's true. It's very unique. So yes.
Unusual spelling.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for your
No
time.
problem.
Appreciate it.